topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the host and their guests, and not those of W4CS Radio, its employees, or affiliates. W4CS makes no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for listening to the Cancer Support Network on W4CS.com.
Everyone, it's Arthi with Light Up Your Life. Welcome to 2022, and hope you all had a restful holiday and took some rest and reprieve. And I know that we are entering a new phase in our people call it the pandemic, but really I think we're realizing it is a state of our lives. So hopefully taking some reprieve and always staying safe with everything. And I know that New Year's is a big time for resolutions. And to be honest with you, I used to be all about resolutions myself. And I also apologize today. I'm facing some storms, so my internet might be a little my video might be glitchy. I hope it's not too bad, but just under advisement. But what I was going to share with you is, resolutions. We have these goals and aspirations, and I hugely believe in them. But recently, I was watching. I've mentioned Sadhguru in the past, which is the seeker of truth. He's this guru based out of the south of India. And he has a center, actually, I believe it's in Georgia, somewhere, Atlanta. I don't know. I believe it's down south somewhere, Isha Foundation. I mentioned him because I watched the 5 minutes of him saying that really consciousness is everything. So being conscious of what it is that we're looking for, and then going towards solutions for that versus these resolutions you create, especially January the 1st. And I just want us to be mindful of that because I carry that now. A lot of us focus on losing the extra weight or setting up goals to eat healthy. So when we think of longevity, we want to think about solutions that go for longevity. And so I want to remind us that the focus should really be on consciousness, like doing things and feeling things on that conscious level. And actually, I think this is a great discussion we're going to have today with our special guest on the concept of consciousness, because it's all about our last couple months. A lot of our episodes have focused a lot on recovery, excuse me, and addictions. And I think I mentioned that my life keeps calling me to, in my own work and practice, really focusing on addictions and grief and how those two are really synonymously going together in so many aspects. But I'm really excited about today's conversation. Today's special guest is Keith Keller, and there's so many descriptors. My girls were asking me who I had on the podcast today, and they're like, he does all of that? I said, yes. I said, people do amazing things when they're called and they have purpose and mission, that they can do very many things. So Keith is a registered nurse. He also, which I really love that we'll be talking today on energy healing too, because he has a different modality besides Reiki. So he's also an energy healer. And he's an activist. He also is an author. We'll be talking a lot about this book, The Infinite Recovery Handbook. Today, we'll be focusing a lot on that too as we delve into it. He also runs a primary care addiction program, and he's built a supportive community in the idea behind recovery. And so I'm really excited about today's conversation again because those of you who may not per se be the one facing addiction, I know in every family there's someone that you are wanting to help, or even in your family circuit, and just gaining that knowledge and awareness. Like I started this episode with consciousness, right? Bringing things into our realm of consciousness, being aware, and then starting that momentum for change is hugely important. All right, without further ado, I welcome Keith onto our show for today.
Hi, Artie. How are you?
Good, Keith. Can you hear me? I apologize. We have some storms out here because of the weather, so we may have a little.
Okay.
Are you able to hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah, your picture's a little in and out, but we'll make the best of it. Okay. Sorry, I just sat there for 5 seconds of dead air. That introduction made me blush. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, thank you. Really, seriously, my girls, when I was telling them this morning when we were driving, I said I was going to be recording an episode. So, yeah, so why don't you go ahead and start by talking to us about all of the different roles, starting with, you are an RN, how you got into the world of medicine and how you started your journey into this work, which is such a personal and professional story for you, I know.
Well, I do wear many different hats, and were it not for being in recovery myself for 30 years, I probably would not be a nurse. I've been in recovery for 30 years, and I've been a nurse for 25. So looking at the math there, it was certainly sequential. I was already working in the medical field, and I guess it was time for me to step up and assume more responsibilities, become more involved in direct patient care. And this opened up an amazing number of opportunities and doors for me to experience many different areas of nursing. There's many opportunities, many avenues for an RN. And I didn't pay attention when, they kind of would suggest you need to focus, you need to specialize. I've done many different things as a nurse.
That's awesome. So I heard you say that so I'm glad you're sharing your story, that the fact is that the nursing came out of the recovery part, you're saying.
Sure. Yeah, I've been in recovery for 30 years from alcoholism and polysubstance abuse. And this is a big part of my story. It's as well as being a nurse, as well as learning energy and holistic pursuits, and also as well as kind of a science-based personal development. And I bring my approach from all of these diverse areas. So I think this gives me a kind of a unique insight. And I've in my Infinite Recovery book written about this, and I've created a model for recovery that embraces some of the cutting edge elements of the science out there today, and is inclusive of all forms of addiction and many diverse approaches to recovery as well.
Yes. And we'll be talking about your book. First of all, I have to mention this to everyone because there are a lot of books now about addictions in general, and not.
It's a crowded space. It certainly is.
However, yours in specific kind of goes through the timeline of all of it, which is so nice, which makes it truly a handbook. So I wanted to tell you how much I appreciate that, because the fact is, you don't have a lot of a holistic approach to it, to the fact. That's why I'm really excited about your approach to energy work in this field, because the more and more we look at addictions, I feel like the more and more we have to look at this whole person. We've been treating the addiction for so long, but not treating and not helping that whole person heal.
As a symptom, yeah. And this is one of so as a nurse, I see every day that we focus on symptom management, often at the expense of the underlying cause and condition. And, the mainstream medical model has an approach to addiction, and too often the underlying causes are lost or buried and not properly addressed. Yeah, there's no Band-Aid. I regard the whole situation now. I like to say there's many moving parts to the addiction crisis, and that would be from the recovery standpoint, the medical standpoint, the research standpoint, the criminal justice standpoint, the social stigma standpoint. The list goes on. And there's just so much to keep track of and so much to try to understand. But ultimately, I think about the person who still suffers, and that sort of helps me reframe and stay focused.
Yeah, I can imagine. You're absolutely right. A lot of moving parts and a lot of pieces. Keith, do you mind sharing your own recovery process and your own story on just that journey for you and how it looked? I know it was 30 years, when you think about it, but and just so that the audience and myself can understand your story.
They out there, they call that a drunk or drug-a-log, and that's something I can touch on, but I'm very short in that process on, the suggested approach to that is tell how it was, tell what happened, and tell how it is today. So how it was, I could not go a day without a drink or a mind-altering substance, and I viewed life through the lens of the open bottle of vodka that I kept under the seat of the car. And that's a little shameful for me to think about, but I say that because it gives permission for other people to confront their shameful secrets, and the parts of their addiction that are very difficult to face up to. So like many, I hit a bottom and I made a decision. But in that time frame, I questioned whether I wanted to continue living. Certainly did not want to continue living as I had been. And so I, paced the floor of my home and made a decision that I would change. And fortunately, I'd sort of had enough experiences. I knew where and how to reach out for help, because I had become ready. And that was, a turning point. And I talk about a powerful decision with more intensity and energy than the power that my addiction has over me. My writing quite a bit. And this, was very, and so this is based in, kind of a willpower, and that will take you only so far. And very early in this process, who had no religious or spiritual basis for my life, was not raised in a church or a religious background. And I guess I was in that limbo somewhere between atheism and agnosticism. Either, just chose not to believe or didn't know. And, I actually, pragmatically, I'd been to some recovery meetings and seen and heard people who talked about succeeding, who were doing well. And, a few commonalities they had were a belief in something greater than themselves. And I struggled with that, certainly. Oh yeah, they're talking about the religious God, aren't they? Okay. And I found the willingness, the desperation, really. And then I got on my knees and I said a prayer, kind of a question, that if there was something there, could I have a sign of this? And I was sincere, I was humble, I was motivated. So I said this little prayer out loud on my knees behind the closed door of the bathroom, and got up and observed that lightning had not struck. I was not, miraculously changed. And so I kept my plan for that morning, and I went to a Alcoholics Anonymous meeting where something so surprising and profound occurred that I was dumbstruck. I received in a form I never would have expected, some sort of supernormal answer to my prayer, and thought about this, and okay, what had I done anything to deserve this or merit this kind of a gift? No, but I was really honestly sincere and humble about asking for it. And I thought about it, and I now had the gift of faith, and it was like there was light at the end of the tunnel, even though I was, still feeling sick from withdrawal, and had made a mess of my life and my job and my relationships and everything else. But I guess I saw a way out, and I just kept moving toward it. And, time began to pass, and I began to, I was staying sober, not only staying sober, but I was, entering recovery. And 30 years ago, it was really, there were few alternatives to the traditional model, which is what I term the 12-step programs of Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. And so I went to this, and I asked a lot of questions, in the first months and years. But I did the work. I did the steps. I took the suggestions. Went to meetings. Read the literature, and sort of found my own peace with the question of spirituality. I'm it didn't make me a religious person, but I do sort of believe that there is a creative intelligence of the universe that orchestrates the life processes. We see so many, similarities in everything, from science to art to philosophy to, and somewhere down the line, I think all these things will meet up and come into a kind of a harmonious agreement. But for the moment, yes, we have many questions about this. And I realize that the spirituality question is a stumbling block for many. So it is something that I do talk about in my writing. Now, there may be a cat involved in this interview. It would be worse if I tried to close the door. Trust me.
No worries. No worries.
Good energy from cats.
Yeah.
So I went back to school. I quit smoking. I got healthy. I bought a home, and by 5 years, I had reinvented myself externally, seeming like a different person, and started a new career in nursing. But I asked so many questions that they could not answer in the traditional model. And I realized, when they said, just keep it simple, they didn't know. Mm-hmm. And so I realized, okay, I'm going to have to answer these for myself. And that has been going on for, the last few decades. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I delved into energy healing. And I studied polarity therapy and earned an associate's in that. Not so much with the intention of hanging a shingle and going into practice. No, I was still working as a nurse in the mainstream model of healthcare in many different avenues, as I said previously. But I wanted to understand how all this stuff fit together. I was reading voraciously everybody from Carolyn Miss to Gary Zukov and stumbled upon Lynn McTaggart's book, The Field, which talks about science that stumbled across things that, you know, they couldn't understand, you know, legitimate funded researchers who, you know, got the answers that they didn't plan on. And this, you know, this was another avenue that I pursued. And I started learning about, you know, maybe there's something coherent here, something that ties all this together. 10 years ago, I began, I heard Joe Dispenza on a radio show. And I better buy that book. And then I thought, well, yeah, I like the book. Maybe he gives talks. And I, you know, went online and, oh, he's going to be in upstate New York in 2 months. Let me see if I can. So I actually met up with him. You know, our paths crossed. You know, like the first day of the workshop. And you know, this was back when you could talk to him. He wasn't surrounded by handlers and you know all of that stuff. And So we had a chat that day, and then the next day he asked me to come talk to him while he was setting up for the workshop, and you know this became you know a bit of a pursuit. There was a lot to be learned, and the meditation skills in particular I found to be you know really helpful. So you know I was involved in that community, worked to the advanced student level, and for the last actually 5 years now, I've kind of separated myself from that while I've been working on my second book. I kind of want to have a clean slate to, you know, do that work. But I pull in, you know, from all of these divergent areas, things that have, you know, in what I figured out by learning from Joe was what I had done in the previous 20 years. Intuitively, I had stumbled into sort of becoming this different version of myself. I was no longer the man who, you know, had certainly the bottle of vodka under the car thing, but also realized that, okay, I never think about or want to alter my consciousness with a substance. And, you know, basically I'm feel so free of my addiction that it almost begs the question, well, I mean, why, you know, couldn't I go back? But why would I? I would not choose to alter my consciousness for anything. Quite literally, when you know, I've had a couple of minor, you know, surgical procedures well, I actually had my appendix out last year. But going back a few years, a knee arthroscopy, had a real serious talk with the anesthesia people. And a lot of the work I've done in nursing has been in operating rooms. So I kind of have an idea how that works. And I knew that if I had this procedure done under local, if I got too sedated, I would no longer be able to cooperate with, you know, by relaxing my legs so the surgeon could do his examination. And he'd just look at the anesthesiologist and say, all right, I can't work. Please put him to sleep. And I would have a tube down my throat and be in the hospital all morning. And, you know, which was what I was trying to avoid. So, you know, initially they kind of said, okay, yeah, sure. No, you're not understanding me. We're going to, and I made them understand. And so, you know, half an hour after I got off the OR table and I'm leaving day surgery, you know, I thought I'm really glad I, you know, had that talk with them. But that is based in my desire to experience every element of what life offers and not cloud my senses with anesthesia. So to sum up, I guess, I look at, you know, addiction fundamentally, it is where someone takes something from outside themselves to affect how their internal state is. And my version of recovery is where we learn how to regulate our internal state from within. No need for the outside substance.
Wow, I do a lot of, the discussion of the work that we have to do, and you talked about you did the work. I have decided, there are a lot of people who think things come easy to people. I have decided there's nothing that comes easy to anybody because everybody's facing their own demons and their own battles. It is all work input to get work output. So thank you for sharing your story. Keith, can you share with the audience about polarity? I would love to understand a little bit more about how that works and how that piece of the puzzle is part of how you look at recovery.
Yeah. Okay. Polarity, and the reason I studied that, it's an alternative healing modality based in subtle energy. It's probably, we're all talking about the same subtle energy that acupuncturists are working with, and the Reiki practitioner works with, and it's what Lynn McTaggart was talking about in her book, and the field. And I really just wanted, kind of a better understanding of how that affects all of us. So polarity therapy is very focused on the practitioner attaining first and foremost a state of alignment, which makes them a facilitator, but not part of a circuit, if you follow, of the energy. And that it was taught to me that that's a healthy approach for everyone concerned, that there's no exchange of negative energy with the client, and or if the practitioner's having a bad day. So it's concerned with blockages and injuries to the human energetic system. Yes, we all have one. It involves the chakras, or energy centers, which are kind of an Eastern tradition. Also did a lot more work in that regard much later in Joe's workshops as well. And now I kind of regard them as, sort of a basic, I guess the generic word energy center works a little better for most people. And corresponding, with each of these centers, they seem to correspond to a neuroendocrine plexus, which makes a lot of sense, since nerves basically conduct signals and energy. So learning about this and how we are affected by, we're in a group of people, for example, there's energy. I looked at the recovery perspective of this. A meeting of AA or NA might have energy. A person could bring a really good energy or a really negative energy. There are energy vampires out there. Some are inadvertent, it's innocent enough. They sort of learned early on, oh, if I kind of get all these people feeling empathy for me, I just feel wonderful at the end of that, and it becomes a habit. Innocent enough, but it's sort of a it's not always right, I guess, in the strict sense. So it gave me, a much different perspective on what a lot of the things I saw in recovery. And of course, the energy of addiction is, very, very negative, very rooted in probably, you could call it karma, you could call it trauma, PTSD, and a lot of the best thinkers in the recovery world now would endorse that, most addictions and predisposition for addiction are rooted in some kind of wound, psychic, energetic. And so, helping people to, whether they realize that's what we're doing for them or not, helping people to kind of cleanse and restore their energetic system to good order is very beneficial, I think.
Yes, I also agree. So in your book, this is a combination because you love science, of course, you're describing. So it's a combination of neuroscience and quantum, this quantum healing modality. But then there's also this really ease in reading this that's not scientific, right? So how's this process been writing such a complex topic that's so multidimensional? Like, how has that experience been for you?
I've realized that one of my jobs is to translate. There's some brilliant people with a lot of initials after their names who are, doing really, really strong work. They're looking at the brain scans and they're writing in the scientific journals and all this stuff, and that's great, but it's really unless somebody can connect that dot to the dot of the person who is struggling and suffering, hence translating. It's all nice scientific stuff for them to talk about at their meetings, for it to help the millions of people who struggle. Somebody's got to kind of pull this together. So yeah, I do see myself as somebody. I'm lucky enough to have that kind of background, that I understand what they're talking about, translating this literally. I talk to people about the neurophysiology of addiction and change, and throw in words like dopamine and motivation, pleasure, reward center, in a way that makes sense to them, and they understand that's why I felt worse for 2 weeks before I started to feel better. Or better still, I tell them before those 2 weeks when they're going to feel worse than better, and they understand that okay, the research says that's a normal brain trying to recover, but in that process it's going to feel. And so this is the benefit, and I guess this is my it's a role I'm taking on, I guess, and pulling in all these areas, but again, the many moving parts, making sense of this is somebody's got to do it, because I don't see anybody else really connecting the dots. Well, yeah, I'm sorry. There are certainly people who are trying, and as we said before, it's a crowded space. But I think I'm kind of onto something here with this model, and I think its time has come. So I'm in the process. I am not an influencer. I am not a rocket scientist or neuroscientist, and I'm just slowly building a platform and getting my ideas out there, and I'm starting to see things start to move in that direction. So I'm grateful for that.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. In your book, you discuss the different types of fears and what the role of fear plays, which, fear is that one of those primary instinctual behaviors, animalistic. It carries us throughout our lives. What is it can you highlight the role of fear in addiction, and what are all the different types of fears that you have found?
Yeah, I remember I had a bold print list of 9 of them, which I extrapolated from the basic 3 I was taught early in recovery. So it was explained to me that it's natural and normal to fear, losing something, having something taken away from us, not getting something that we think we're supposed to get, or is rightfully ours. And to that, I added, those two were what I was taught in the old school model, traditional model. To that, I added my initially fear of looking bad. Think about society nowadays. Stigma, disgrace, shame, falling from grace. And, 10,000 years ago, if the tribe ostracized us, we were doomed. We needed the community, the tribe, the group. So today it's a little different. But okay, so what's the worst that can happen? I about 15, something like that, years ago, I was I took a stab at teaching in a career school medical assistant program. So what's the worst thing that can happen? I completely crash and burn. They're yelling at me that they don't understand, and all right, we're going to take a break, and that happened. Right? Okay, so the worst possible thing, you look as bad as you can possibly look. The thing you fear, and oh wait, I'm still alive. Oh, and I'm going to start teaching again in 10 minutes, and so I better pull it together. I guess people fear change. They fear failure. They fear, and these pertain directly to addiction. They fear the unknown, because on the other side of putting down an addictive substance, it is a life and a way of being that people, if you are someone, if you have been colorblind your whole life, you do not know what 256 band HD color looks like. And that's what I guess I want to convey to people, that you are going to know like a new type of reality. But you can't, the fear is holding you back from believing that this is possible. So one of the examples I like to use is the story of the 4-minute mile, which was one of those things they said it's impossible for a human being to run a mile in less than, in under 4 minutes. And, people were getting close to it, but nobody had actually broken that. So a college track runner named Roger Bannister and his teammates basically put a plan together where they were going to pace this guy Bannister through the first 3 quarter miles and push him to the point where, he would collapse of exhaustion after, but he ran a mile in a couple fractions of a second, under 4 minutes. That was the first 4-minute mile. But pretty soon after that, it became commonplace. A few years later, a high schooler did it. And so what was the big barrier? What was the fear-like obstacle that kept people didn't believe it could be done? And once they saw that it could, it became commonplace. It became the benchmark for middle distance runners, in fact. This is what fear represents for the person with addictive illness, with a substance use disorder. Fear of joining the real world, fear of the consequences of their actions, fear of reality without anesthesia. That was one of my biggest fears, facing reality.
Yeah, reality. Back to that idea that I was sharing earlier about this consciousness, this true living and true consciousness. You talk about in your book calling it addictive illness versus like addictive disease, and you mentioned the idea, because I also believe the exchange of words and how we use words is really important. So can you share why you feel like defining it as an illness versus a disease, or any other way that we look at things?
Well,
Why?
illness and disease, I would, sort of lump into the same category. But what I do point out is that we can call it that. It's the best thing we have now. And it is a far sight better than what maybe half of the people out there are going around thinking it is, which is a choice or a moral failing or a weakness, a lack of willpower. And the science shows us that that control is lost very, very soon in the process, and the literal connections between the midbrain, the pleasure, reward, motivation. I could start bandying about some, nucleus accumbens, ventral tegmental, right? The parts of the brain that do that, and then the front of the brain, or the neocortex, the analytical, knows the consequences, takes responsibility part of the brain, analyzes and thinks about the cat. Pardon me. The connection is literally compromised in an addicted brain, and control is lost. So when doctors and researchers and scientists look at brain studies, they see that, okay, this is a brain with pathology. It's got damage to it. There's physical problems here. This is where the brain disease notion comes from, I think. But when viewed more holistically, because we're much more than our brains, and also bearing in mind that it is the job of a brain from birth. I mean, remember iPods? They come out of the box and there's nothing in them. That's what a newborn's brain is. It's got to be, you got to download stuff into it, right? So the idea that a healthy brain, and viewing a person as more than their brain, and they have life experience, things happen to them, and so addiction then could be the unhealthy reaction of a healthy brain to unhealthy things. Does that make sense? Okay, so this to me seems much more complicated than simply calling it a disease. From a behavioral standpoint, it's incomprehensible. The behaviorists are not able to make inroads. Certainly, the criminal justice system wants to hold the addict responsible for their actions, and punish them with all manner, ranging from jail to probation. There, I think last time I checked, there's like 8 million people in some part of the criminal justice system, either directly incarcerated in the probation system, or there's this kind of newer, it's a more progressive concept, but there's still room for improvement there. It's called drug court. But I digress. The disease model says it's an illness. Society says they're responsible. And in the first place, addiction is more complicated than a physical illness, a behavioral problem, or a social issue. It needs a new definition, and the definition, hopefully will start to serve those who suffer a little more than others.
Yes. And Keith, the reason why wordplay, because with people seeking out, like, our crisis in mental health, it's the same in this addiction converse. It's all the same thing. People have this stigma on receiving help or wanting to seek out help because of the wordplay that's been done. So there has been work now in mental illness. Instead of calling it mental illness, we work on mental health or brain health, right? To start to align the way that we look at things. And interesting enough for you to bring up that we really need to start defining this better, I think is critical.
Very true. And this is part of the reason I just revamped, did a second edition, my book. I wanted to make sure all the usage, which, it's as soon as I finished, a few weeks later, I heard about, they don't want to call it medication assisted treatment anymore. So, I have to rewrite that pretty soon. It is important. And there's actually, I was discussing this with some colleagues recently. There's a duality. People with addiction, people who suffers from addiction, that doesn't exactly roll off the tongue the way addict or alcoholic does, but we who suffer with it are still comfortable calling ourselves alcoholics and addicts. And this is uncomfortable for clinicians, people who don't have the lived experience, but are very invested in the cause and in helping the population. So I'm learning to work with the duality and to consider the bigger picture, that it is important from both perspectives, to constantly be evolving the language that we use. It is important. I couldn't agree more.
Well, Keith, we're in our final moments. If you have a parting message, what would it be? How do you, when you look at this title of infinite recovery, which by the way, I love so much because it is, I think we all realize whatever addictions we all carry, that it is always a conscious process to move with it and through it through our lifetimes. But yes, if you could just highlight what you want to share.
Certainly. But first, let me thank you for giving me this platform to get my ideas out to people. I appreciate that very much. And the work you do is wonderful. Thank you for doing what you do. Two simple messages are that recovery is a skill. It can be learned by anyone. It is not necessarily the random luck of the draw thing that many people believe it is. And that everyone who suffers with an addiction should and could have an individualized approach to recovery that suits their personal needs and circumstances. And those are the two things I want people to know. Those are the two messages that I want to start broadcasting, because for too long it's been otherwise. It's been a mysterious recovery. Has been a mysterious church basement, secret handshake kind of thing for people, and it needs to become universally accessible, and it needs to meet the needs of increasingly complicated people in an increasingly complicated society. And I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Keith. I really love that you're highlighting skill. It's the same with children and behaviors. Like, it's a skill. We have to teach our children skills. We have to teach ourselves adult skill. People say, I don't know how to meditate. I'm like, it is a skill. These are all skills. Mindfulness is a skill. There's nothing. Cooking is a skill. Like, everything, and learn as we go. And breathing is probably one of the only things I've decided is pretty much automatic. But even then, we have to learn how to breathe better, right? So it's a skill that we can teach.
You can choose to breathe,
yeah,
or ignore it, and you'll breathe automatically. It's one of those special things.
That's right. So everyone, just know that for anyone that if it's you or if you know anyone, this book really does highlight everything in a really great format. And I do appreciate, like Keith, the constant additions and updates that you realize are important to doing this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone, here's the website to take a look at Keith's work and all of the And also, if you would like to email for further information. And thank you, as always, for tuning in. And have a wonderful week.
Thank you.